Welcome everyone to our first article review for 2024, and we are super excited to be back with you. 2023 has proven to be very dynamic. We have had so many amazing conversations that can definitely help us to be better cybersecurity practitioners. And it's our mission when we have these conversations to enhance our cybersecurity career development so that we can better safeguard our people, our systems, our infrastructures, our processes, and very importantly, the data that exists within our organizations. And as recently as yesterday, January 10, the Cyber News reported that the entire population of Brazil possibly exposed in massive data leak, putting individuals at serious risk. And many of you who are actually following the various happenings, within the cyberspace, then you would have been abreast with this particular incident. And these are the constant challenges faced by us as cybersecurity practitioners. So, for today, January 11, we are looking at a very important subject, and that is managing a cyber attack. And this is something that many of us security folks certainly do not want to have to deal with, no matter our capabilities. The teams that you are working with the organization, this is something that not many of us are prepared for or really want to experience. But the reality is that these things do happen, and we need to be prepared for these eventualities when they do occur. So today we have Paul Robbins, someone who has first-hand experience in this area. Paul, welcome.
Thank you, Riche. Happy New Year to you, and a Happy New Year to the folks joining the podcast today.
Thank you. Awesome. And Happy New Year to you as well. So, guys, let me first provide you with some background details to our article. Then, Paul shows experience in similar situations, and many of you are familiar with Paul. You would have seen him in many similar incidents, reporting, giving his opinion. In relation to these sort of cyber incidents that do take place, and then we also walk us through the steps as outlined by this article, and then also the places and links so that you can actually take some time to evaluate and assess to go through this article also with your team as well, as it relates to managing a cyber attack. So, to actually hand over to you, let me quickly just give our audience a quick breakdown of this article. Then you can actually take it from there in terms of the steps and also show your experience with similar, incidents. In the article, it says that the Rochester City Council managing a cyber attack. And in December 2021, Rochester City Council was the subject of a targeted ransomware attack, which encrypted its servers and temporarily prevented the council from providing services which relied on the data held on those servers. Further on, it says that they suffered a clever and sophisticated cyber attack, and they strongly believe that what happened to the council could have happened to anyone. And the initial attack was in the form of a single spear phishing email that was inserted into an existing email chain with a subhead. And it's so familiar for many of us. Once the malicious link was clicked, malware was deployed to the computer that was then used to create a route into a network for the attackers. And over about a month, they navigated our network before stealing data and encrypting our servers with ransomware. So very familiar. The various TTPs that are being used are only becoming far more sophisticated. But when we recognize, when we look at it, these are similar things that we see happening from time to time, only becoming more advanced, more unique in the way organizations are actually being attacked. So that you.
Yeah, so a couple things I wanted to lead off with. One is I found this article from someone that had posted. His name is Stuart Wedge, and a good follow on LinkedIn, providing good information on there. So I wanted to give him an acknowledgement because it wasn't something I randomly found. The second thing of it is, as we've been doing these podcasts for a while now, we have various articles that are out there. This is one that I would encourage everybody to take a quick read of. It's about a 10-minute read. It's not long, it's very informative, but really a couple of things from the article that I liked, and we can talk about this more, Riche, is one is the transparency that they give in the article of how they dealt with an actual attack. And that's a big problem in our industry because a lot of people are just guessing what an attack would look like. Incident response tabletop exercises are great, but when there are so many variables involved inside of a cyber attack that it's just not scripted. So you do a tabletop exercise, it's like, all right, malware has propagated our domain controller and we're down, what do we do? Okay, that's part of it. But if you read this article, it talks about services that are being impacted, not only externally but internally. So I would encourage everybody to read it from that perspective. And then I would also encourage people to read it because really this is the type of stuff that we're trying to avoid. We make cybersecurity very complicated. Sometimes we use a lot of jargon. We use a lot of statistics that really have no merit. But this really, as I read it, it's like, okay, this is why we're buying tools. This is why we're buying solutions. This is why we're hiring people or doing GRC, because we don't want these things to happen. So it's a great article that I would encourage all security people to read and socialize internally inside of your organizations. Because again, one of the things that came out from this is, are we going to be able to pay people? Like that's not a technology issue. That's a human interest issue. And so information like that, data like that can kind of help the business understand, okay, what is it that we need to do to protect our environment?
Sure, exactly. One of the things that actually stood out to me is the overall process, the way they actually analyze, the way they actually broke down in terms of the necessary action steps, the challenges that we experience in terms of they spoke to the timing of the attack, its impact, and the recovery process, the cause of the incident, and the lessons learned. Can you take us through all of those phases as was actually broken down in this article? But even before you actually look at this article in terms of those phases, I mean, what are your experience been like in comparison to what you are looking at in this article in terms of actually managing or responding or dealing with these sort of events from your side, from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think one of the hidden things inside of the article that I wanted to point out is notice the timelines of where things happen. Like this happened not during business hours. There was weekend things that were taking place, Saturdays, Sundays, and it was also 4 days before Christmas holiday. And that's very, very common in attacks of, it's not like it's 9 o'clock Monday morning, everybody's in the office, everything's up to date, and then, off to the races. That's not usually the case. Usually it's 3 o'clock in the morning or it's, whatever. So, that's something that I did want to point out that maybe reading the article, you kind of gloss over, but it's important to know, these events do not happen at the most opportune time. They happen at times that are, that are not good. One of the other things that I want to point out is the fact that the whole business was involved in this incident. So if you look at the people that wrote the paper, you look at the people that were involved during the timelines, it was the business that had to be involved, and it wasn't just the IT department or the security department. You had HR involved, you had other business units involved for that, and that's a real life thing. And that's again, or I'll challenge security professionals that are out there is when you do these incident response tabletops, don't limit it to just technology, because there are real business issues and business decisions that need to be made that fall out of the jurisdiction of IT. So that's a very important important thing. I think another thing that I'll add is, if you look at the timelines that took place, there were times where they were like, man, I don't know if we're going to make it. Like, catastrophic things could have happened, and impacting internal and external. Internally, can we pay our employees? Externally, building permits, mortgages, for houses, things like that. All of that stuff is being held up because of this attack. So when we think of a cyber attack, we don't consider the hundreds of thousands of other people that'll be impacted. So, if Amazon were to experience a major cyber attack and an outage, people can't purchase things. If a healthcare organization experiences a cyber attack, then medical care cannot be conducted in a timely and an efficient manner. So cyber attacks and their impacts spread through and expand through a whole bunch of different things that are tremendously impacting to individuals that are doing business with you.
Exactly. One of the things is that, though, can we truly prepare for a cyber attack or a cyber incident in an organization? Looking back at this article, it was saying that prior to the incident, the concern worked to mitigate all types of cyber threats. This included identifying security vulnerabilities, working towards protecting itself using a particular NCS Cyber Essentials for those who are familiar. Investing in IT infrastructure and having mandatory cybersecurity training for all staff, with additional training for senior and general managers where appropriate. And the council had also done a lot of awareness, raising around cybersecurity for itself. However, this event actually took place affected the organization. Bad actors actually within their systems for quite a while. Yet still, they had actually done some amount of preparation.
Yeah, I think what organizations need to focus in on. So if you look at the NIST CSF framework, the last two domains that are listed are respond and recover capabilities. And to your point earlier in what you were just saying, Rashay, a lot of us are very proactive with tools and saying, okay, if we install this, then something bad cannot happen. Or if we implement this policy and procedure, nothing bad can happen. And that's not the way the real world works. I could have security systems, I could have cameras, I could have locks on my doors and whatever. But if someone wants to get in my house, they can get in my house. Like, that's just the way life is. So it's treating your environment, your network with the same thing. So what I like about this article and what it points out is, assume that it can happen, but then how quickly can we get up and restoring and responding to the incident that took place to make sure that it's not as business impacting as possible, and going from there. And now you have the FBI mentioned last week about dual ransomware, where now these ransomware gangs will attack you, wait a couple of weeks, and then attack you again. To kind of compound the attack that took place. So, when you experience something, it's not just, all right, let's pay the ransom and get back to business as quick as possible. It's, responding in a way that is going to say, okay, this happened, but we can't let it happen again. And then making sure that the business is in place to be resilient to another attack. See, that's the other thing that people don't realize about these attacks. And dual ransomware became public last week from the FBI, but that's always been the case, because once you get hit, you're a target regardless of whatever it is you do. If you pay the ransom Now you're a paying customer to one of these ransomware gangs. Now it's like, okay, they paid us right away. We can come back in 6 months and then we'll do it again and they'll pay us again. If you don't pay, then you become a challenge to these organizations to say, oh, okay, you didn't pay. We're going to get our money one way or the other. And so we're going to come back and try to attack you again. So, this article, why I really love it, and again encouraging people more so than ever to read it, is because it's not just a finite thing. It's not just a finite thing of where this happened, this is how it ended. It takes you through the whole thing, and it's not closed ended. It's not now we live happily ever after. It's okay. This is the world that we live in. This is how we protect ourselves, and when they come back, not if, but when they come back, this is how we're going to protect ourselves. And if they're able to penetrate our environment, this is how we're going to respond and recover as quick as possible to make sure our business is up and running.
Sure, exactly. And I think that's one of the most challenging aspect of actually dealing with cyber attacks, cyber incidents. That continuity, that ability to um, move on despite what's happening within the organization. And I think that is also another thing as it relates to ransomware attack is the fact that even though you might pay the ransom or decide not to pay the ransom, you never know where the guys actually have your foothold in your system. And you can never trust the fact that when you do pay a ransom, then all is well, as you have mentioned before. So I think the recovery phase is very, important. Looking at the article, it says that they actually had to move from response to recovery because they decided to build a completely new system. So
Yep.
we're looking at time, we're looking at resources, downtime, the overall impact to the organization. And the person is only organizations are in that position to be able to say, let's rebuild the system. How do we continue business while the system is being rebuilt? Rebuilding the system is the cleanest way to say yes. We know for sure we do not have no um, remnants of the bad guys having a foothold in our system, but only organization and the startups, have that capacity, that capability to actually rebuild. Actually, we're talking about your overall, your total infrastructure, your servers, your applications, your files, all being, restored. Even if you're going to be restoring data, the question is how um, confident are you that there are not enemies within those backups that can actually give the bad actors control back into your system again. So it's not something that is easy as you had mentioned in terms of actually having those tabletop exercises to write on paper to say this if this should happen then if X then Y. When you're actually in your situation and it's a totally different ball game that we're dealing with. Nonetheless, being prepared, having that in mind, having the necessary communication channels in place that actually makes a lot of difference in the overall process.
Yep. Two of the worst questions that you can ask in a cyber incident are, how did this happen and what do we do? And the companies that make it with the least amount of pain have those two questions answered up front. And going back to Riche of what your expertise is with governance, risk, and compliance, you got to know the risk. You have to know the risk, because I've sat in these incidents before, and the question is, well, how did this happen? If you're asking that, then you're working backwards now. You're working backwards. It's bad enough that the house is on fire, but now while the house is burning down, if you have to go back and take a step back and say, okay, well, how did the house get on fire? It stalls a lot of things. And then what do we do? Because you bring up a good point. See, a lot of people are like, oh, well, you got hit, you paid the ransom. There was an incident a few years ago for a hospital in the States. and they paid the ransom, and it was like $17,000. So all people saw was, oh, they paid the ransom. It was $17,000. I knew the Microsoft rep that worked in that, and he's like, no, he's like, they paid $33 million to restore their system. You know, that's a lot. That's a lot of money. You know, I don't care how big your organization is. $33 million spend that you weren't expecting is a lot of money. A lot of money. So that's the thing that you have to figure in your incident response plan, your budgeting, you know, your response and your recovery, is that it's not as simple as, you know, the criminal comes, I pay them to go away, and they go away. Like, it's terrorism, you know, it's terrorism. And if someone is holding someone hostage and you negotiate with the hostage and you pay the hostage, that doesn't end terrorism. Like, it still goes on. It still happens. It still happens to certain groups of people that experience it multiple times. It's the same thing in the digital world in which we live in. So, you know, again, that's why, you know, I give the Gloucester City a lot of credit. I have not seen. I've heard that there are some examples of this out there, but I give them a lot of credit for actually sharing the pain that they have, because a lot of incident response is guesswork. You know, we kind of touched on this already, where can we truly know what an incident would be, and how it would impact us? A lot of it is guesswork, but this is actually associating like real problems, real money that was spent, real lives that were impacted, to kind of give us a real picture into it. And I can tell you, I've had the unfortunate task of being involved in several of these. It is one of the most painful things an organization can go through, is an incident, because it impacts everybody. This is not a technology thing. Technology and security tools and solutions, you know, help you to protect as best as you can against it, and then maybe give you some forensics information if something were to happen. But you know, it impacts everybody. You know, you have a call center in your environment, your call center's down, people can't work, you know, people can't do their work, and that's very impacting. You know, there was an attack that took place with Kronos a couple of years ago, and people's paychecks weren't cut for the month of December. So, you know, I don't know what a technology is gonna, you know, what that's gonna, you know, where that's an IT issue. But when employees don't have money coming in the house during December, which is holiday season, whatever holiday is you celebrate, that's going to be a real problem. That's gonna be an absolute difficult problem. So yeah, so incident response plan. You know, you want to put in malware, that's fine. But hey, what if we can't pay our employees? What are we going to do? You know, or what if we can't pay our vendors? What are we going to do? Because they could sue us if we don't pay for them. So it's adding the human element to your incident response capabilities that are going to help you out in the long run.
Yes, I totally agree. You know, I'm glad that you actually made mention of that point, that this is not just about IT. And so often we consider this to be an IT issue. It's all about the applications, the servers, that are in place. But it's realistic, view or perspective, a 360-degree view in terms of taking into consideration the overall governance structure as it relates to security, IT, um, your management structure. All of that needs to be taken into consideration. Going back to your processes, your people, your technology, that needs to be taken into consideration, and not just the technological element of this. I mean, now in light of all of this, how can we effectively plan for and manage a cyber attack?
What was that? I'm sorry.
Um, how can we effectively plan for and manage a cyber attack? And secondly, based on your experience, what are the most common challenges associated with managing cyber attacks and ways to help with this challenge?
Yeah, so let's start with the second question, because I think the second question will lead in. What are the common challenges that organizations face? One of the major ones is getting organizational buy-in to the plan. You have to start there. to get not just IT, not just security teams, but the whole organization to buy into the plan, because the plan the plan actually has to work. People have to work the plan. I guess that's the best way to put it. People have to work the plan. So it's a very common challenge because you're putting what people look as business inhibitors to work by putting in security measures, and so it's getting people to understand this is the why we do it. So a conversation that I have is, a sales team for an organization really should have security embedded in their tools and the way that they're doing work. And the sales team will say, well, this is slowing me up. I don't want to do MFA for my accounts, or I don't want to have encryption on my data. And then which I revert back to and say, okay, what if somebody stole your client list and they started selling to your clients? Like, would that be a good day for you? No, it wouldn't be a good day for you. So this is why we have to do the security. This is why we have to have security in place. So being able to overcome that challenge is by giving real world examples of how security and, the ability to respond and recover is in place to make their jobs and lives a little bit easier. What's the best thing that you can do to plan? When you build your plan, don't build it with anything other than how it impacts your company. So if you're a healthcare organization, don't build your incident response plan based off of a finance company or a manufacturing company. When you test your environment, don't just say, oh, we got hit with malware. Talk about how the malware impacts your business, not somebody else's business, and make it very customized and specific to the organization. And it's the same thing with physical security. If I work in an office in New York City, my risk and my security is different than if I had, an office in North Dakota or, whatever. If I had an office in California, I'm worried about earthquakes. If I have an office in New York, I'm not worried about earthquakes. I'm worried about, stuff on the shore, whether it be a hurricane or something like that. Like, it's got to be very specific to what it is that your organization could be impacted in. And then it's getting the organizational wide buy-in. The best security teams that I've worked with, weren't the most expensive ones, weren't the, that had the biggest budgets. They weren't the ones that had, cyber lawyers and compliance offices and things like that. They were the organizations where everybody understood their fiduciary responsibility to the organization to keep it safe. Those are the ones that did it. And that doesn't cost money. To get people to understand the value of what their organization is and what impact it could face from a cyber attack, and they then act accordingly, those are the best teams. Because everybody has that responsibility now. Now the CISO, doesn't have to be the one that's just laying the hammer down and being the judge, the jury, and the executioner and making it difficult for people. Now the whole organization is buying into the fact that, we got to keep ourselves safe here. So those are the two things that I would say about that.
Sure. And I could not agree less in terms of all that you have actually made mention of. And going back to the overall point that this is an article that nicely breaks down the overall case study. How it is presented, looking at the impact, the recovery phase. This is a very, well presented document. Not to mention the lessons learned from this overall activity incidents that actually took place. Looking at the overall BCPs, their DRPs, and the list goes on. So, guys, that's a wrap for this week's article review. And I trust that you all found this informative. Stay safe, everyone, and also don't forget to share this conversation with your network. And Paul, it was a pleasure having you once more to provide those insightful perspectives. So, guys, until then.
Thank you, Riche. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Okay, bye. Great, guys.